Good morning, everybody. By now, you probably already know, most of you already know that I am Stefano Dallaglio, that I am one of the staff members at VDPH. VDPH stands for Venice Center for Digital and Public Humanities. This is our last day of the summer camp. Time flies. And last but not least, we have with us Mirco Carrattieri. Before that, the usual recommendations. First of all, remember to put your microphone on mute. If you forget it, I'll do it for you, just to avoid background noises. And well, you know that the session will be recorded and published on our YouTube channel. So if you don't want to appear, just don't go on a video. You can ask your questions in the chat. The chat is technically going to be recorded, but we are not going to make it public. Okay, so today we have Mirco Carrattieri. Mirco Carrattieri is the director of the Istituto Nazionale Ferruccio Parri in Milan, and is the former director of the Museum of the Republic of Montefiorino and the Italian Resistance. He was one of the founders of the project Paesaggi della Memoria, and he's the editor of the journal E-Review. He has worked on the Italian historiography in the fascist period, on Ermanno Gorrieri's biography, and on the First World War in Reggio Emilia. His public history works include the exhibition Così lontano, così vicina, the app Resistance App, and the ebook La Resistenza in Italia. Together with Valeria Gallini, he is the editor of the series Storia in Pubblico, published by Unicopli. His most recent publication is Per una public history italiana, for an Italian public history, appeared in 2019 in the journal Italia Contemporanea. Today, Mirco is going to talk about public history and memory. Mirco.
Okay, good morning to everyone, also by me, and thank you, first of all, to Stefano, Deborah, and all other friends of Venice for this invitation, and all of you for your kind attention. My presentation consists of 3 parts today. The first one is about memory, the second one about the relationship between memory and history, and the third and last one about the specific role of public history in this theme. So I will speak for about 40 minutes, I think, and if you have any question, please interrupt me and intervene promptly. Thank you. So the first point is memory. It's a very large issue, as you know, and in the last 20 years, 25 years, there has been a sort of memory boom. There are a lot of definitions about memory boom or age of commemoration or obsession for memory. We will see in next minutes. But I want to point some things about memory, 4 things actually. So first of all, the difference between memory and remembrance, to use the English terms, but to use the Greek ones, the original ones, between mnemosine and anamnesis. So there is a memory which is only a storage of past things, but there is also a memory which is a process of recognition, so an act by which we get something from the past. In the different European languages, there are different words for this distinction. So in Italian, memoria and ricordo, in English, remember and remind as a verbs, or in German, Erinnerung and Gedächtnis. So this is the first thing, memory as storage or versus memory as a process of reappropriation. The second thing is about the new discourse about memory in a digital age, which I think it's particularly interesting for you here. So we use the term memory to define a digital storage of information, and we intend a sort of external memory, which is an object external to ourselves. It's interesting that this external memory has to be activated to be effective. So it's an external memory, but it needs a human being to activate, or another actor to activate it. And it's also interesting in Italian that, as we will see, memory and history share a goal, which is to save the past, But in Italian, we use save, salvare, both as save and that download. So in Italian, save and download the past are two different aims of memory and also of external memory. Third point, one of the most important and memory theories in the last 20 years, the distinction between individual and collective memory. The most part of sociology, European sociology, in particular French one, took its start from Maurice Halbach's theory in the first half of 20th century, and in particular two works by Halbach in 1925 and 1950, the second one posthumous, about the so-called collective memory. So Halbach, which was a disciple of Durkheim, theorized the distinction between the individual memory and the collective one, which is a sort of social frame of our think about the past. This theory had been very important for French historiography, and not only. And also in the current reflection about memory is still very important, even if there are a lot of correction about it. But the most important thing is that after Halbach, we know that collective memory, that also societies have a memory, and that this memory is a sort of cultural frame for any other individual memory or thought about the past. There are different redefinition of collective memory in sociological theory of the last 20 years. For example, to use the Italian thinker Paolo Jedlowski, the idea of social memory or common memory or background memory. There are differences, faith differences, but they are all about a collective memory opposed to the individual one. The most important conquest of the last years is the idea of collective memory, and also the last work by Halbach was that collective memory is not a plain one. There are different memories, and so these memories can be also divided or dissonant or fighting in different ways. So collective memory is a sort of battlefield for different actors, as we will see after. And also there are hard and soft memories, and feeble or big memories. So we have a lot of distinction, a taxonomy of collective memory after the work of Bayard Vox. The last thing about memory itself in my presentation as a sort of joke. So which is the opposite of oblivion? In the ancient Greece, as you know, they have two different gods. Mnemosyne, who was the Uranus daughter and the sister, but also partner of Zeus and the mother of the Muses. But they had also another god, Lete, the god of oblivion. So in the common sense, oblivion as an opposite memory. But in these recent current studies about memory, we know that memory is not the contrary, the opposite of oblivion. The opposite of oblivion can be maybe conservation, as Tsvetan Todorov said, or also in some sense justice is another possible opposite of oblivion. Instead, memory is always between the past and oblivion, is always a process that implies selection and interpretation. Is all of it clear? Is there any question about? If you have, you can use the chat. If we have no questions, we can proceed. The second step of my presentation, which is about the relationship between memory in this sense, in this broad and complex sense, and history. For a lot of time, since St. Augustine onward, memory and history were confused. Both of them, in fact, were about the narration of the past. Both of them, in Augustine's words, were the past in the present. But after these sociological theories and also historiographic theories of the first half of the 20th century, we have developed a divergence between memory and history. And in particular, in the French school of the second afterward, we can find different theories about a strong distinction between memory and history. For example, in the essays by Jacques Le Goff and Christophe Pomian for the history of Italian history by a Einaudi publisher during the 80s that had been translated also in French back during the 90s, there is a clear distinction among the two terms, because the apex of this distinction is in the important work by Pierre Nora in the anthology, historical anthologies by Le Goff of 1978, The New History, but in particular in the big work, Le Lieu de Mémoire, Memory Places, published since 1984 to 1992. In these essays, Nora noticed that we are in a sort of commemoration age, in which the memory triumphs. Instead of it, Nora is for a sort of revenge by history, and he said provocatively that history has to destroy and delegitimate memory. What does he mean? That memory is simple, subjective, absolute, qualitative, while history is rational, complex, objective, relative, quantitative, and there are some other distinctions which are possible. This so straight distinction between memory and history, the first one subjective, the second one objective, the first one popular, the second one scientific, has been contested in the last decade, also in French. After a different works about memory in this sense and against memory in this sense, for example, the works by Fetan Todorov in 1995, Memory Abuses, or Annette Vieviorka, 1998, The Age of Witness, until Henri Rousseau's work on obsession of memory, a sort of history of French memory about Vichy with different stages, and the last stage is an obsession for a memory which had been removed in the previous year. And after different and similar essays about and against memory, also in the English world, for example, a claim by Charles Meyer against surplus of memory in 1993, or Jay Winter against the memory boom in 2006. So after this stage, we have a current stage in which this distinction is not so firm, sustained. For the last scholars, in fact, history and memory are different, but they are connected and interviewed. And so we have to study this link and also to distinguish some points about. A first step in this rethinking of the relationship is the work by the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, and in particular is thinking about memory, history, and forgiveness. Because in this work, Ricoeur says that memory is the matrix of history as a discipline, but then history is a sort of reflection about memory, a reflective stage of the thinking line. And history, so, is the end of the line, and history can make the knowing about the past broader and complete, can intervene on memory. The work by Ricoeur was discussed by the historians, also by Nora in his review, Les Débats, but I think that Ricoeur is the reference point for the current reflection about the relationship between memory and history. And we can see also in the Italian context some interesting points about, made, for example, by Sergio Luzzatto, by Enzo Traverso, and recently also by Marcelo Flores in a new book which has been recently published, Cattiva Memoria, Bad Memory, published by Il Mulino. In these works, we can see memory and history as connected in different ways. One as a part, as inside the other, one after the other, or one over the other. So different approaches, but the idea that memory and history are connected, and that the traditional opposition made by the Annales school during the 60s and 70s has to be renewed. Because the topic is that memory and history are similar, not only because they are both thought and elaboration about the past, but also for other two features that are very important in the current reflection. First of all, both of them are constructed, are artificial, are processes, and so both of them are not innocent, because there are some reasons for this construction, some interests in this construction, some point of start in these constructions. So not only memory as a naive stage, but also history as a construction, as some interest beside, and so on. And the second feature is that both of them are plurals, as we have seen. Not only memory, collective memory in Halbach sense, but also history. The definition in Ricoeur's words is struggle for interpretation in an hermeneutic view. But apart from them, also historiography as a debate at a different level, but a debate. There's not only one interpretation possible. So these features that are common both for memory and history don't mean that they are the same thing, obviously. We have to maintain the distinction, but we have to remember that also history is constructed and also history is plural. Okay. And maybe the most interesting work about this approach, is that of the German scholars Ian and Aleida Assmann. They started from different points, the language and the culture, but both of them theorized the so-called cultural memory, and the idea that history is a part of this cultural memory. So the distinction that they trace is not memory against history, but different kinds of memories and history. Memory as an archive and memory as a function to recover the Legoff's words, the distinction between monument and document, or monument and archive. You know, the word archive, or in English, but and in Italian, is connected with a root that means the past that is important for the power to preserve. So not the past itself, but the past it is important to preserve. So I think that this theory by Asmans is very important to trace a complex relationship between memory and history. But if you want, we can back to this issue after, if there is any question about. But my aim was to reconstruct this trip from memory and history that are the same to the distinction, a rigid distinction between memory and history, to last stage, a distinction that doesn't forget the link, the relationship. Is it clear? If we have no question, I'm quite worried. No question though? You're thinking about? So we can go to the third step and then you actually answer to eventual question. So if memory and history are so interviewed, which is the difference and which is the role for public history in this pattern? So I think that memory and history are similar for the previous features, but obviously there is a different, they are in a different point of the line. So as in a recurse theory, history is the next step after memory. And history can use memory as a source, can have memory as an object of analysis. But without ingenuous thinking about historiography, we have to recover the important specific feature of historiography as were manifested in the most important theories of the 20th century, since Annales to current ages. And in this perspective, the role of history is that of reaffirm its specific feature in the field of public memory. And so we have to debate about the role of history in public memory, because historiography is no more the most important actor and agent in the construction of the common sense about the past. For a lot of reasons that we can, if you want to, enumerate in the next minutes, but the result is that history is no more the only and no more also the most important agent in the construction of a common sense, at least in our societies. The public memory, in the previous sense, is built by different actors. Surely the historians, but at least other three vectors. First of all, the state, the states, the authorities in general. They have an authority on the construction, on the building of the past in the societies through memory policies, which are very different, very important, a very important field of study for memory history in these last decades. So the first concurrent agent is the authority, the political authority, which is memory policies. The second important concurrent are the media. In a society as the current one, in which the historicity regime, to use the Artax's words, is presentism, present risk to englobe other dimensions of time. And media information, which is about the current events, tends to be an important actor also in drawing the past and the future. And the way in which media draws the past is very different, as you know, from the historical way in the proper terms. And the third important vector is memory. Collective memory in terms of struggle of different memories, individual, group, and national memories. If history has to face these challenges, deals with these transformations and accept the challenge, I think that public history can have an important role. If we consider public history, the history that accepts this challenge, to use particular methods of historians in order to intervene in this public debate about the past. Obviously, there are a lot of risks, dangers, for example, banalization, trivialization, commercialization. In all memory studies of the last decade, we know about these risks. But this challenge, I think, is ineludible, in particular for history, if history wants to keep a role, a social role, also in our current society, a presentist society. I think that can be very useful to read the last works about memory, in which, as for example Marcello Flores or Valentina Pisanti, there are a lot of claim for a humile history. History can no more be so proud against memory, but has to accept the challenge of public memory and the idea to share with memories the same field in some way, or surely for, of course, for claim its specific role made by methods, by scientific debate, and so on, but has to accept this challenge. And I think that public history is the field of this acceptance. So as to recover, in conclusion, some of the most important claims of the current age, I want to cite two other works. The first one is the Praise for Oblivion by David Reef, because recovering the famous Nietzsche's assert about the usefulness of oblivion, Reef reminds us that remember is important, but also oblivion is an important part of the construction of a society. For example, in order to build a new Europe, we have to create a common memory which is in his words, a background memory. It can't be identity memory in the national sense, but a lighter memory, a sort of background for new specific identities, but a common background. So the importance of oblivion to build a society, but on the other hand, the claim for the role of memory and history at a different level to save the past, to recover this expression. And we can use for this the recent book by Gerald Schwartz, The Memoryless, in which this writer, she is German-French, reminds us that Europe in the second part of the 20th century had a trouble with its past. And when in the countries where the people have greater troubles about its past, there is a rebirth of racism, populism, and fascism. Obviously, as I have said before, memory and history can collaborate for this aim at different levels. Memory is useful to fight with dangerous oblivion, but history is needed in order to create a critic think about the past. And so, as a device for deconstruct myths and slogans in the sense of Aleida Asmo. So, in conclusion, I want to cite an important Italian historian of the resistance struggle, Claudio Pavone, which was born in 1920, so this year is the centenary of his birth. And Pavone surely sum up this trouble in this sense, with these words. The boundary between history and memory is indispensable to affirm, but very difficult to trace. Thank you.